So as an introduction to פיגול, acting in the future, פיגול, Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, I wrote a little verse, I wouldn't call it poetry, to describe פיגול in a way that is inspired by my very deficient understanding of some of the ideas of quantum mechanics. And I think that the whole field of quantum mechanics, as I say, with the very limited understanding that most of us have in that area, makes it a little bit more accessible to understand what the Torah is teaching us with פיגול and how to apply it, how to use the concept beyond the area of Kodshim. Reality listens most closely at the beginning. Intent, the silent spark in the genesis of action, whispers to possibility which way to turn. In Kodshim, the silent spark of intent embedded in the action becomes reality. Let's understand the definitions of פיגול. When it comes to definitions in new areas of halacha, the master of definition is the Rambam. So let's start with that. Says the Rambam in Psula HaMikdoshim Perik Gimel Halacha Beis, Mipi HaShmu'a Lamdu, we learned through Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we'll see that in a moment, Shezeh Shene'amar BaTorah, that this which it says in the Torah, and we'll see the pasuk in a moment, V'im he'achel ya'achel mipsa zevach shlamav, that if one were to eat from the meat of a shlomim after the second day is over in the third day, Eino medaber ela b'mechashev b'shat hakrava sheye'achel mimenu b'shlishi. Does not mean eating, it means thinking about eating at the time of the shchita. V'hu adin l'chol korban, and that applies to all korban, not only shlamim, shechashav alav b'shat ma'asav, where he thought, he had intent at the time of action, sheye'achel mimenu la'achar zman hara'ui la'achilat oto korban, that the korban will be consumed outside of the allocated time period that korban is meant to be consumed in. V'chein im chashav lahaktir mimenu b'mizbeach davar hara'ui la'haktara la'achar zman hara'ui la'haktara. And it doesn't only refer to achila, to eating, it also refers to any of the other activities on the mizbeach that have to be done within a certain time period. Kach lamdu mipi hashmu'a, this is what we learned in Torah Sheba'al Peh, in the oral law. Echad achilat adam ve'echad achilat mizbeach, whether we're talking about the consumption by human or consumption by the mizbeach, so every korban is consumed. It's consumed in part, except for the olah, which is consumed entirely by the mizbeach, by the altar. Most korbanot are consumed in part by humans and in part by the mizbeach. Some parts the baalim can eat, some parts the kohanim can eat, and some parts the mizbeach eats, so to say. The idea of achila, we usually translate achila as eat. It's not the right translation. Achila means consume. It really means combusted. So when Moshe sees the burning bush, what does he see? That it doesn't get consumed by the fire. So achila means consumption through combustion. It's the conversion of matter into energy. That's what achila means. When you're eating something, you're converting matter into energy. When the mizbeach is consuming something, it's converting the matter into energy, into energy of Kodshim. And so whether we're talking about achilat adam or achilat mizbeach, im chashav alehen achar zmanan, if his intention was that they be eaten after, again, consumed after their allocated time, harei hakorban פיגול. The korban is פיגול. That's the case of פיגול. If it's chutz limkomo, if your intention is to eat it out of the rights in a different space where it shouldn't be eaten, that's not פיגול. The korban is possible. We've got all sorts of other problems with it, but it's not פיגול. What is unique about פיגול? Mipi hashmu'a lamdu shebichlal din zeh, this is now the Rambam in Perik Yudchet Halacha Bet. We also learned in Torah Sheba'al Peh, shelo yafsid hakodshim b'machshava. You're not allowed to damage kodshim with thought. That's already wow, like just those words. You're not permitted to damage kodshim with thought. He doesn't use the word to puzzle, to make it pasul. He says lafsid. to damage it, to detract from its value with a thought. So in Kodshim, a thought can detract from value. Because it's very similar to causing a physical impairment in the animal. Just as you're not allowed to cause a physical impairment in the animal, which would disqualify the animal from being brought as a korban, you're not allowed to do that. A machshava is the same idea. It's a similar idea. A thought is like hatalat mum, like actually causing physical damage. There's no malchus because it's a thought. At the end of the day, it's a thought. And then in halacha vav, kol korban shnitpagel b'machshevet hazman, kamo shebi'anu, any such korban which has become pigul through a thought of incorrect timing, kol ha'ochel mimenu kazayit b'mezid chayav karet. That's what the serious part of pigul is. If you then eat from that korban, there's a chiyuv koris. Not only is the korban not valid, and is the korban posel, but in the case of pigul, if a person were to eat from that korban, the punishment is correct. And lastly, in halacha zayin, this pigul only applies with dvarim shehutru bein la'adam bein lemizbeach, with something that becomes permitted for consumption by human or mizbeach. So in the process of kodshim, there is a triggering action and there is a consequence. The zrikat hadam, sprinkling the blood on the corners of the mizbeach, on the sides of the mizbeach, is a triggering action. What does it trigger? It triggers kapara, it triggers atonement, and it triggers heter achila. It allows for the korban to be eaten, and it allows for the emurim to be brought on the mizbeach. That cannot be done until it has been triggered by the zrika. And the Rambam says here, as we'll see in our Gemara as well, only something whose permissibility for consumption is triggered by an earlier event can become pigul. But not something which is the matir itself. So, for example, the Gemara talks, and the Sifra talks about, if a person ate the blood itself. So there are all sorts of other problems with eating blood. But are you also over pigul? If you intended, you were zorek the blood, you threw the blood with the wrong intentions, or you shechted, you slaughtered with the wrong intentions, and you drank the blood, no, that's not pigul. It's only that part of the korban whose permissibility for consumption is triggered by an earlier event. If that earlier triggering event was acted upon with the wrong intent concerning timing, then the consequence becomes pigul. So the complexity is so intriguing, and it's so beautiful, but it means the Torah is incredibly specific with what this pigul is, and there are reasons for it. Bear in mind that when we look when we're learning Kodshim, we're learning about the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is an area that is hypersensitive to forces and energies in the world which the rest of the world is not sensitive to. It's not that they don't exist in the rest of the world. And it goes all the way. It goes to Eretz Israel is more sensitive than other parts of the world. Yerushalayim is more sensitive than the rest of Eretz Israel. The Beis HaMikdash is more sensitive than the rest of Yerushalayim. The different parts of the Beis HaMikdash become more sensitive. So this idea of pigul that we need to, as we learn in Kodshim, is to understand what is this energy which is so amplified in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore we can actually experiment with it, we can see it, we can work with it. Whereas in the rest of the world, it's there, but we can't measure it, we can't work with it, we don't understand it. So as we learn these principles, it's important to understand what is this force, this energy, which is so amplified in the Beis HaMikdash that it can cause an isur karet, that it can destroy a korban just with a thought. What is this all about? So where does it come from? It comes from a very peculiar posuk in Parashat Tzav. V'hanotar mibsar hazevach, we're talking here about a shlomim. A shlomim can be eaten for 2 days and the night in between. Is that right? 2 days and a night. So you bring your shlomim on Monday morning. You and your family can enjoy the shlomim for the whole of Monday night, and Tuesday. Comes Tuesday night, you can no longer enjoy the shlomim. And if you do eat it on the third day, bo'esh yisoref, then that's called notar. Any meat that's left over has to be destroyed on the fire. Again, it has to be consumed, but not by a human being and not by the mitzvah. Ve'im he'achol ye'achel mibsar zevach shlamav b'yom hashlishi. Now look at this process. And if a person does eat from a shlomim on the third day, when he's not allowed to, lo yeratzeh hamakrivoto, the one who brought it as a korban, it will not be accepted for him. Lo yechashev lo, it will not be considered a shlomim. Pigul yeh, it's pigul. Va'nefesh ha'ochelet bimeno avonat tisa, and anybody who eats from it will be chayiv koros. Very strange wording. Says the Sifra. The Sifra is on Teres. You know, we have brises that are very, very old. We have the Bechilta on Shmot, we have the Sifra on Vayikro, and we have the Sifri on Bamidbar and on Dvorim. And there we have the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law that expands the Posuk. The Sifra itself is very ancient, and it must have existed in a different form originally, because when the Posuk in Shmuel talks about David HaMelech's general, Benayahu ben Yehoyada ben Ishchai, it says about him, V'hika et ha'ari b'toch habor b'yom ha'shaleg. He killed the lion in the pit on the day on a snowy day. And the Gemara says in Brochus, the Tana Sifra de Beirav b'yom ha'desitva. That means he was such a Talmid Chochem, this general of David HaMelech's army, and the chief of staff of Shlomo HaMelech's army, Benayahu ben Yoyada, was such a Talmid Chochem, that he learnt the entire Sifra on an autumn day. The days are short. That's how the Gemara learns this praising. Why would you praise that he killed the lion? What's the big deal? Well, for Jews, that's not a big, that's not a way to praise somebody. Kill the lion. For some people, that's a thing. They kill the lion, they put the lion's head up, stuffed in the living room, and that's a trophy. But for us, that's no big deal. But to learn the Sifra in one day, that is. So of course, the Sifra is all the Tanoim, and it must have existed at that time in a much more compact form. But we have the Sifra, and we see from that Gemara how important the Sifra is. So the Sifra says, Omer Rabbi Eliezer, Kof Oznacho Lishma, listen carefully to this posuk. Sha'ashochet et zivcho al menat l'ochlo b'yom hashlishi. What the posuk is telling you is not if you ate it on the third day, but if you shechted it with intention to eat on the third day, hareze below yeratzeh, then it's not permitted. Omer Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva says it can't possibly mean anything else. Im achal mimenu b'yom hashlishi yeh pasul, v'yev shalomar ki ma'achal shuksha yachzor v'yeh pasel. It must mean that, because otherwise, does it work retrospectively? There's a good korban. Person brings a korban. It works. There's kapara. The family's eating the korban. The kohen's eating the part that he can eat, or use the part that he's allowed to use. Then somebody eats it on the third day, and retrospectively, does that undo the kapara and undo the korban? It can't work retrospectively. And Rabbi Akiva goes on to say there's only one case at Zav, and Zav, where we see this retrospective action, but not here. Talmud Lomar hamakriv b'shat hakravahu nifsal ve'enu nifsal b'yom hashlishi. This posuk is talking about thought at the time of shchita, not eating 3 days later. That's what the posuk's talking about. And then the Sifra goes on to expand. It's not only Zriko, it's Shchita and Kabbalah as well. It's not only Achila, it's all sorts of other areas as well. The Sifra expands. So why does the Torah use the word Achol Ye'achel? That's always troubled me with this posuk. If it's talking about a thought at the time of Shchita, why say it in a way that you need the Sifra, you need a Rabbi Elazar and a Rabbi Akiva to tell you what the posuk means? Really? Can you not just open the Chumash and read the translation and understand it? No, you need the Sifra. Without the Sifra, you won't understand it. Why not just say, V'im chashov yechashev b'yom shchitato? If you had a thought while you were shechting it, why don't you say what you mean? Why word it in such an ambiguous and a misleading way? Explains the Malbim. Says the Malbim, I've got an even more subtle-ish question. Why is it not in the past tense? V'im achal, if he did eat. Or v'im ochal mibsar hazevach. V'lama amar yeh achil b'lashon atid. Why is it in the future? And the Malbim was one of the greatest Torah lights of the 19th century. And the important work, he wrote many, many important works. One of the most important was the Malbim on Tanakh. And here on Chumash, what he does is he links the Sifro, in the case of Vayikro, the Bechilta, and the Sifri, in the other case, he links them to the Psukim, so that you can see the flow from the Psukim, from the verses to the oral law, because that was the time that Reform was beginning, and they were arguing about the irrelevance of the oral law, and the Malbim was one of the first people who wrote a really important Lomdische academic work that makes that link inextricable. And he says here, and he gives us an important principle, Achiven al makshevet achila. This has to be talking about the thought of eating, not the act of eating. Achol yeachel does not mean if it was eaten, or if it will be eaten. It means if it was thought to be eaten. Sheha'atid morea harbe pa'amim al-machshevet ha'poel. Because the future tense is often used to indicate a thought. Because thought is how you can do something in the future. An action can only be in the present. I can do something now. I can have done something in the past tense. But I will do something in the future. It's not done yet. But the way you can do teaches the Malbim. You can actually do something in the future through your imagination. The power of thought can actually impact the outcome of the future. As if you've done something, as if you've acted. Don't think your future is limited. You can impact your future by what's going on in your mind. And so the Torah teaches us to teach us this principle. How you think about the eating that is going to take place impacts the actual eating. It's as if there actually has been eating. That's the actual essence of it. And that leads us into our Gemara, where the Mishnah talks about Pigul. We don't even have to go into it yet, because the whole sugyas of Pigul will become much clearer if we understand that. But if you go into my opening verse now, reality listens most closely at the beginning. What you intend very subtly, subconsciously, not even verbalized, when you set something up, when you start something, you're starting a business, you're starting an institution, you're beginning to learn a piece of Gemara, you're teaching a child, you're starting a new relationship. What's going on in your mind is creating the future. Intent, the silent spark in the genesis of action, whispers to possibility which way to turn. You're influencing it. You're not necessarily predetermining. As we talk about in quantum mechanics, you're limiting possibilities. Until you give it a measured reality, anything's possible. That's the beauty of this whole concept in quantum mechanics, as I said, with my very deficient understanding. That until you've measured something, anything is possible. We have that in the Gemara, that until you've measured something, there's a potential for bracha. Once you've counted the money in the bank, nothing can happen to it. You've counted, I've got $500,000. That's not going to become $600,000 magically. But before you measure it, it could, because it's unlimited potential. There is unlimited potential in reality until you limit it. And one of the ways you limit it is with intention and with thought. In Kodshim, that silent spark of intent, embedded in the action, while you're shechting, you're thinking, that thought gets embedded in the shechita, becomes a reality. That's how chol ye'achel. That's no longer a machshava. Kodshim, the Beis HaMikdash, is so sensitive to the abstract. It's so sensitive to the intangible that even a thought embedded in an action becomes a reality that limits and in fact contaminates the korban which is being brought. That's the idea of Pigul, which we need to understand as we learn Kodshim, and we need to understand in our lives that as we start doing anything, we'll start davening in a few minutes. The way we start davening, the way we put our tefillin on, the starting moments are so important because they carry within them unbelievable potential. Your tefillah, when you daven this morning, has unbelievable potential to change history, to change the world. You can limit that potential by what's going on in your head. And if we can just leave our minds open to possibility, and when we're planning our lives, and when we're planning an event, or we're planning our day, Leave the Ribbono Shel Olam opportunity. Don't limit the Ribbono Shel Olam. Don't tell him what you expect, because he'll give you at most what you expect. Allow yourself to be surprised by the abundance and the generosity and the bracha that the Ribbono Shel Olam might have in store for us, provided we don't limit it by the intent that we embed in our actions and allow them to become our reality.